doing videos now for the central nervous system for you guys, so let's get started. Obviously, we have different models, and there's more than just this, so don't know it on just these two, but these are just kind of some pretty good models. So here we have a nice little human brain, looks great. The cerebrum. The cerebrum is basically this entire piece that looks like a big bag of worms. So this whole thing is going to be your cerebrum. On the flat model, again, this entire part that looks like a big bunch of worms is going to be the cerebrum here. You need to be able to tell right and left. Obviously, on this model, you can't tell right from left hemisphere, but this guy you can. If I say for a practical, I tear this in half, and I give you just this side, and I say, which hemisphere is this? What you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, which way would that go inside of my own head? So if you put it inside your own head, as you can see, it's the left hemisphere. This one will be the right. Okay, so left and right, good to go. Lobes are easy if you learn the bones, and you shouldn't have a problem with the lobes whatsoever. So remember, this is how the little brain sits inside of your little head. The bone that was in the front that made up your forehead was the frontal bone, so conveniently enough, this is the frontal lobe. There's a crack right here that runs kind of up and down. That's going to separate the frontal lobe from the lobe that's behind it. This lobe here, you remember the bone is the parietal bone. This is the parietal lobe. In the back, once you get to the very extreme end of the brain back here, we're going to call this the occipital lobe here. It doesn't really have a nice perfect line that divides it like the frontal lobe does from the parietal lobe, so we're just going to call it the occipital lobe if it's way in the back. Last but not least, you have a little crack right here that separates really this lobe, this frontal lobe, from this lobe down here. This is going to be, if you remember the bones, the temporal bone, temporal lobe. So just remember frontal, temporal, look for that central sulcus, parietal, occipital. So those are all your lobes. If I labeled it down here, really the only ones I could give you, if I put it way up here, obviously it's going to be frontal bone. If it's behind the central sulcus, here it's going to be the parietal bone, and if it's way in the back, it's going to be occipital bone. You can't see temporal lobes on this guy. Okay, moving along. So the longitudinal fissure. The longitudinal fissure you cannot see on a flat model. You have to have both hemispheres. So longitudinal fissure. Fissure means a really big, deep crack. As you can see, there's a big, deep crack here that separates your right cerebral hemisphere from your left. This is going to be your longitudinal fissure here. So it's this big, long crack in the middle. On the side, we talked about this just now. We said there's a crack that runs up and down here, separating your frontal lobe from your parietal lobe. This is going to be your central sulcus. A sulcus is a crack. Sulcus is a crack. So whenever you hear the word sulcus, think of a crack. So in general, any of these cracks, this crack here, this crack here, this crack here, those are all sulci. Sulci is just plural. So this is a sulcus here, sulcus here. This one has a special name called the central sulcus, running up and down. Sounds good? The lumpy bumpy. So the worms or the lumps are going to be your gyri. So this is a gyrus here, this is a gyrus here, a gyrus here. These are gyri. Anything that's a raised up lump is going to be a gyrus. Okay, so if we look now inside the lovely brain, you have some glands you need to know. The one dangling back here, I think it's got a number 20 something on there, doesn't really matter the number though, but above your cerebellum, you have a little gland right here called the pineal gland. So it's towards the back of the head, it's kind of behind the brainstem. So this is your pineal gland here, and on this guy, again, look for that cerebellum. Above the cerebellum, you have a little pink blob right here, that's going to be the pineal gland right there. So those are your pineal glands. Underneath your pineal gland, here, believe it or not, this little white thing is actually separated into an upper and a lower piece. This is not the greatest model of it, but that's where it is. So the upper bump on this white little blob is going to be called your superior colliculus, and the one that's lower, more towards the inferior, is going to be your inferior colliculus. Some are going to be better than others, so let's see if this one's better. This one's a little bit better. So see, now we took the cerebellum out of the way. If we look here, again, you can see there's a bump, and then there's another bump. The upper bump is going to be the superior colliculus, the lower bump is going to be the inferior colliculus. This guy, same story. So you can see this little white thing is kind of a little divot right in the middle. The upper bump is going to be the superior colliculus. The lower bump is going to be the inferior colliculus. We already talked about the cerebellum. The cerebellum is this darker colored guy. You can see him on the side here, so this is all cerebellum here. This one's missing its cerebellum, so you know cerebellum. And then this guy, this entire kind of browny, tanny colored part is going to be your cerebellum here. Cerebellum. The vermis is part of the cerebellum, so what we actually need is two halves of the cerebellum to put together. Obviously, it doesn't look like the other ones. Just to repeat myself, again, longitudinal fissures in the middle. This is all cerebrum. On the bottom, this guy's going to be your cerebellum here. Central sulcus, separating frontal lobe from parietal lobe. Lateral sulcus, separating temporal lobe from parietal lobe, and then occipital lobe is in the back. If we look now, we're looking at the cerebellum. Remember, the cerebellum is the lower part, obviously not different colors like the other models are, but this little connection right here between the two hemispheres of the cerebellum, this connection is called the vermis. So this is going to be your vermis right here in the middle. Sounds good. Olfactory bulbs. So remember, our nose is towards the front of our brain, obviously. So here at the little ends of this little yellowed cord is going to be our olfactory bulbs. This is where your olfactory nerves are going to come out, go through that cribriform plate and those olfactory foramina, and go down into your actual nasal cavity. So this is olfactory bulb here and here. You can't see it on the flat one. so don't look at the flat one. But you can see it on this guy. So we put him back together. Again, remember he's missing half of his cerebellum, or half's gone. That's why we can't see the vermis. But here, towards the front, at the ends, this little enlarged area is going to be your olfactory bulb where your olfactory nerves come off. So that's the olfactory bulb right there. This cord that connects this olfactory bulb back to the brain is going to be the olfactory tract. So this is the olfactory tract here and here. Sounds good. Optic nerves and optic tracts. Well, not the greatest model, but hopefully you can see it. So if we look here inside the brain, not the olfactory tract that comes back, but right here, there's actually a little white cord that goes back that direction. It X's, actually it crosses, makes a little X, and then it comes out in this direction, this little nub here. This nub should actually continue, go through the optic foramen or optic canal, and go to the eye. And that cord that comes off of right here is going to be your optic nerve. So it's going to go to the eyeball. So that's your optic nerve. If you can see the cross where the actual optic nerve comes back and joins this little white layer area here, and then it comes back and splits going back that way, this little X is called the optic chiasm. So a chiasm means an X. So optic chiasm is here. And then coming back off of that, oh, actually you didn't need to know that, so never mind. So that's all you need to know. Optic nerve would be this end that keeps going, and the actual X is going to be your optic chiasm right there. Good. Now if we open her up, on the inside, this central pink region right here is going to be your thalamus. And right here, this little white dot is actually a connection point. So this is going to be your intermediate mass of your thalamus. So it's actually going to connect this half of the thalamus over to this half of the thalamus right here. Again, this whole thing in the inside is thalamus inside. Sounds good. Hypothalamus. Hypo means underneath or lower than. So if this is your thalamus here, this little region that kind of points out this direction is going to be the hypothalamus right here. So hypothalamus, thalamus, intermediate mass of the thalamus is there. Sounds good. Now we need to add this thing back on where it fell off. So thalamus, intermediate mass of thalamus, where it's labeled 21, this little pointy part is going to be your hypothalamus. This little white cord right here that connects to this little dangly ball, that's going to be your infundibulum. So that's your infundibulum leading to the pituitary gland, which is going to be this guy right here, just plain old pituitary. Sounds good. Cerebral peduncles. Peduncles are going to be, if we look kind of past the pituitary, get that temporal lobe out of the way, down in here. This is going to be your cerebral peduncle here, where it's kind of narrower before you get to this bigger enlarged ball. Cerebral peduncle is going to be right there. This enlarged ball is going to be the pons. You can see it here. It looks kind of like a little ball in the front. Pons. So if you look at this guy, just to reiterate what we've done so far, thalamus is here. Intermediate mass is here. Hypothalamus is this small region here leading to the pituitary gland. The infundibulum is this little cord right here. The cerebral peduncle would be this region here before you get to this enlarged area that is your pons. So cerebral peduncle, and the pons is here. Once we go past that, this area right here, before you get to the edge of the actual base of the skull, this is going to be your medulla, and then after that it's going to turn into spinal cord. So on this guy, remember cerebral peduncle is this part, so it's going to be like right here. This is pons, this is medulla, and then it's going to turn into spinal cord after that. Got fornix. It's going to be this larger one is going to be your corpus callosum, which you do need to know. So corpus callosum is this large white matter tract. It actually connects the right hemisphere to the left so they can talk to each other. But this other tract that's smaller underneath it is going to be the fornix right here. So here's your fornix here, underneath your corpus callosum. Ventricles are open spaces inside of the brain, so this is a nice model for that. As you can see, there's a big open space I can stick my finger up in. This open space is going to be a lateral ventricle. So on this guy, this thing that's pink would be the lateral ventricle. So lateral ventricle would be here. Lateral ventricle would be here. Now if we move a little bit further down, we said that the pink part is actually going to be the thalamus, but surrounding the pink part, you're going to have some open space. So there's a little bit of open space around your thalamus, and that's going to be your third ventricle. So your third ventricle is the open space kind of sitting on top of the thalamus. Then you move down through this little tiny channel, I got my fingernail in, that's going to be your cerebral aqueduct, and what it does is connects the third ventricle down to the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is this space right in front of your cerebellum, between your cerebellum and your pons and your medulla. So this little space right here is fourth. And on this guy, just remember, second is up here, or laterals are up here. The third is going to be around the thalamus here. The cerebral aqueduct is going to be right there, and then the fourth ventricle is going to be right there. And that's it for the list on this side. This is a neuron. Hopefully you got that far. Okay, now what do we got for on our neuron? So this guy coming down, actually remember this is actually going to come out, it's actually going to connect up here. So this is going to be a nice big huge nerve, but for the model they broke it in half just to be confusing. So this should actually connect. So this is going to be the axon. So the axon is going to run right down the center all the way to the end, which is called the axon terminal. So the axon is in the center. Sounds good. It's surrounded by white matter. I don't know if you guys need to know that, but whatever. I'll call it myelin sheath. Alright, so if we go back up to the actual where most of the action is happening up here, this is called the cell body or the soma. So this is going to be your cell body here. It's got a nucleus obviously on the inside, but it's got all these little pointy things that are sticking out all over the place that are acting like little antennas, because this is actually other neurons. So if I'm a neuron, I got my little axon coming out to a synaptic terminal. I'm going to send some information to this guy. This branch that's going to pick up that information is going to be called the dendrite. So you got a dendrite here, dendrite here, dendrite here, dendrite here. Think about them as like antennas, picking up signals from other cells. Cell body decides if he's going to do something about it. If he decides he's going to tell his neighbors, what's going to happen is he's going to generate an action potential right here in this little V-shaped region, which is called the axon hillock. So this is where you're going to generate your action potential. From here, the action potential is going to travel down the axon all the way to the end of the synaptic terminal, where it's going to release neurotransmitters to tell the neighbor what's going on inside the cell. That's it for a neuron. Spinal cord. I think this is the only model of spinal cord we have. Maybe, maybe not, so don't quote me on that one. So first thing you need to figure out is which side is dorsal, which side is ventral. So what side goes towards your back, what side goes towards your belly. Easiest way to tell them apart is this lump right here. So these are what we call dorsal root ganglion. So basically they're a bunch of cell bodies clustered all together inside of basically a nerve. So this is going to be your dorsal root ganglion, which means that this, where it connects to, is going to be the dorsal side. So this is towards your back, which means that this is towards your back. This side is towards your front. So dorsal side is this side. Sounds good. We can't do any of the meninges because we don't have any meninges on here. They're going to be thinking about them as like layers that surround the spinal cord. There should be three. There should be one that's straight up tight against the spinal cord. It's going to be called the pia mater. The next one out, which looks kind of like a spider web, is going to be the arachnoid mater. Think arachnoid, think spiders. And then the one that's the furthest out, the biggest, fattest one, is going to be the dura mater, which we might be able to see on a sheep brain. So we might be able to see that after all. All right, anyways, moving along. So we've decided this is the posterior side here, this is the ventral side here. So what we need to find now is going to be the posterior or dorsal gray horn. It's just going to be these branches of gray matter that stick towards the posterior side. So this is going to be your posterior or dorsal gray horn here. This one where it's just kind of sticking up 3D, posterior or dorsal gray horn here and here. Which means that obviously the other ones that are pointing towards you are going to be the anterior or ventral gray horns here and here, and the ventral gray horns here and here. Sounds good? White columns are just going to be areas of white matter. So you can have white columns here, 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 and here, and here. And they do have names. You don't need to know them, so I'm not going to tell you, but it's just posterior, lateral, and anterior white columns. It's just white matter. Axons, basically. All right, the central canal, I think that's pretty obvious. It's the canal in the center, so right about here. It's got cerebrospinal fluid traveling up and down in it. Then we have a couple of things called a sulcus and a fissure. So you guys saw on the brain, fissures are really big, deep cracks, where sulcus is a crack, but it's a smaller crack. So if we actually look at the size of the cracks, this crack is bigger than this crack. This is going to be your anterior median fissure, or ventral median fissure here. This is going to be your posterior median sulcus, because the sulcus is skinnier. So this is your posterior median sulcus, anterior median fissure. Same thing here, anterior median fissure, posterior median sulcus. Last but not least, you have roots. Roots, think about them just like on trees. So these are your dorsal root ganglions. These little connectees, these little cords, are going to be your dorsal roots. Down here is going to be the ventral roots. So these are ventral roots, dorsal roots, these little strings. And that's it for spinal cord. So. Okay, so now the cranial nerves, you guys' favorite part. Luckily for you, they go in order. So if you just know the order, it's fine. 1. So 1 here. 1. 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. See him chilling right there? If you go laterally, 4 is right there. 4 is right there. 5 is these big nubby ones sticking out here. 5 is right there. 6, 7, 8. So it goes 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 10, 11, and 12. So they just go in order. So if you just start at the top, closest to the nose, move down. So always start middle. So go 1, 2 is going to be your optics. Obviously, this one is going to go into your eyes. And then start in the middle. So 3, start medial, and then move lateral 4. So it goes 3, 4. Then go to the next chunk, 5, moving down. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so just remember, start at the top. Work your way down. Start in the middle and work your way out. Okay? Hopefully you guys can do that. If you call them CN1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's fine. You're welcome. I don't care if you know that they're optic, olfactory, optical, motor, I don't care. Okay? That's it. Alright, sheep brain. Here we go. So obviously you should be able to find the same stuff on a sheep brain as you can find on a human brain, with the exception of maybe central sulcus. So major parts, as you can see, the cerebrum is going to be the big wormy part, just like it was on the human brain. So this is the cerebrum, this is cerebrum. This is going to be the right hemisphere, this is going to be the left hemisphere. So right cerebral hemisphere, left cerebral hemisphere. Dividing them just like in people. We had the longitudinal fissure going up and down the center. Sounds good. They still have the same lobes that we do, even though they're sheep. So in the front is going to be the frontal lobe. Towards the middle, roughly, is going to be the parietal lobe, and the back is going to be the occipital lobe, and then in the bottom, this kind of lump that sticks down, will be your temporal lobe down here. Just like in humans, you got gyruses and sulcuses. The gyruses are the lumps, so the lumpy lumpies that are sticking up. Gyrus, 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 gyrus. The cracks in between the gyri here are going to be sulcus. This is sulcus, sulcus, sulcus. Sounds good. What else can we see without trapping? Let's see. We already pointed that out. Longitudinal fissures right here. Oh, cerebellum. So in the back, obviously there's a border between these two. This is your cerebrum up here. This is your cerebellum down here. Down in the center is going to be the vermis of the cerebellum, just connecting the right and left hemispheres together. Sounds good. If we flip her over and look on the underside, just like in the human, you had the olfactory bulb. This is going to be an olfactory bulb right here on the sheepy. Obviously, sheep have better senses of smell than we do, so their olfactory bulbs are going to be larger in proportion. So this is going to be an olfactory bulb. This is going to be an olfactory bulb here. Coming off the bulb, you can see there's a white tract that goes back, your olfactory tract. Again, olfactory tract. So the bulb's at the end, the tract kind of leads back into the brain. Moving along. So believe it or not, this is going to be part of your optic nerve when they cut the brain out. Obviously, doing a very good job. So this is going to be your optic tract. The chiasm, there should be an X. It goes right across here. Some of the sheep brains will have it. This one clearly does not. Actually, where is Gary? Gary has it. Hang on. Yes. So obviously, this is the brain a little more cleaned up, but this is what it looked like before they cleaned it up with it and didn't have the eyes attached. So this is Gary, guys. Welcome. Hello, Gary. Alright. Yeah, what? They can see really well at night, right? So, and sheep aren't exactly brilliant. That's why they don't need a very huge brain. Alright, so obviously this is going to be an eyeball, and then that means this is the optic nerve going to the eyeball. So this cord going to the eye is the optic nerve. You can see now there's a cross, right, where it comes back and it X's before it goes down into the brain. This is your optic chiasm. This guy is just missing the optic nerve that comes off close to the eye. This is the chiasm still here, though. Alright, Gary, that's all we needed you for, really. You can still hang out, though, buddy. So what we need to do is basically slice right down the longitudinal fissure. So we're going to go right down the center. Try not to do too much tissue damage, but these are not exactly the sharpest scalpels in the world. Right down the middle. It's not like cutting a chunk of steak. You want to do it nice. Okay. Split the spinal cord. In the middle. Perfect. Okay. See this tissue that I'm getting stuck on? That's actually going to be meninges. So the meninges are the things you guys needed to see. That's going to be your pia mater, that very thin kind of like saran wrap that wraps around the brain. So pia mater is the innermost layer. On top of that, you'd have an arachnoid mater that would look more like a spider web. And then on the outside, like we can see on Gary here, this heavy-duty, thick stuff is going to be dura mater. So this is dura, obviously a lot thicker than this very fine little pia mater. And then between those is a layer you can't really see at all unless you have an image. Okay, so now what do we need to find on the inside? We found all this good stuff. Okay. We look at our lovely list. So, remember in the human, the pineal gland sat above. This is the cerebellum here. This is the cerebrum up here. The pineal gland was in between. This very large structure right here is actually the pineal gland. So it's much bigger in a sheep than it is in a person. So pineal gland is here. The superior and inferior colliculi, I may be able to see, maybe not. Ooh, I just ripped it. Never mind. Not that side. I don't know what all these he wanted you guys to be able to find. So pineal gland, again, big. If we look here, this bump has two lumps. It's got an upper bump and a lower bump. The lower bump is the inferior colliculus right there, and then this larger upper bump is going to be the superior colliculus here. Again, next to the pineal gland. The pineal gland's there too. Alright, moving along. What do we need to find? Thalamus. So on the inside, this whole region here is going to be your thalamus right here. The intermediate mass you really can't see. So just know that this is the thalamus. The intermediate mass is roughly right there. But this is your thalamus here. Again, thalamus is here. Hypothalamus just means the region that's a little bit lower. So if this is your thalamus here, this whole little triangle area that goes this direction is going to be the hypothalamus. Coming off of that, you'd have your infundibulum and your pituitary gland. Those got cut off. Obviously, they didn't do a very fantastic job with taking these brains out. Cerebral peduncles. Peduncles are easiest to see if you kind of go like this. So this region right here is going to be a cerebral peduncle. So it's basically this entire section in the middle, kind of below the thalamus, but above where the pons is. It's all going to be cerebral peduncle. Usually I'll label it right about here, though, above the superior colliculus. Cerebral peduncle. You can also see it right here, cerebral peduncle. So here's cerebral peduncle. And once you get to this lump, this is all part of the midbrain. This lump is called the pons. So once it kind of bumps out, it's going to be a pons. So again, cerebral peduncle here. When it lumps up, that's going to be a pons. So pons is here. And then once you get past the lump, it starts to get skinny again. So once the lump kind of ends, this lower part down here is going to be your medulla, and then once you get kind of past the end of the cerebellum, we're going to call that spinal cord coming off. Inside, we got a couple more things we need to be able to find. We need to find the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is going to be this big ridge up top. So again, the big ridge of white matter that's right here, up top, corpus callosum. Underneath your corpus callosum, there's going to be a space. So you can see it right here. I can stick my little pointy thing in there. That little space underneath your corpus callosum is going to be the lateral ventricle. So there's a lateral ventricle right there. I ripped the fornix. That's the fornix that connects right here that I just ripped in half. So corpus callosum up top, fornix on the bottom. In between is your lateral ventricle. This space here around the thalamus, so this is your thalamus, the space right here underneath the fornix is going to be the third ventricle. Moving down, not the greatest cut, but there should actually be a little trail that goes right about here. That's going to be your cerebral aqueduct, which is going to feed down into the space here, which is going to be your fourth ventricle, which is in front of your cerebellum, but kind of behind the pons. That small space can be the fourth ventricle. So again, over here, we can get inside of there. Lateral ventricle is up inside. Corpus callosum's on the top. Fornix is here on the bottom. Under the fornix is the third ventricle right here. The fluid then drains down. You can kind of see it right here, this little tube. Cerebral aqueduct leading down into the fourth ventricle, which kind of goes all the way down in here and over in this little area. Fourth ventricle. I think that is it.